Last week, I ranked the strongest beings in Mortal Kombat, from gods to cosmic beings and even the universe itself. No, I'm not joking. But today, I'm doing the opposite and ranking the weakest characters in Mortal Kombat, many of which you've likely never heard of because they only appear in one game or something like that. And you're gonna laugh at how pathetic some of these characters are. Don't skip to the end! Alright, don't do it. The video's not that long and I explain my points very thoroughly, so you don't want to skip. But also, I have a challenge for you all today. If you manage to get 2,000 likes on today's video, then I'll shave my beard. That's right, and leave just the goatee. It's most likely gonna look really goofy, but I'll do it for my audience, for you, the people, if we get 2,000 likes on this video. Then for anyone new, please consider subscribing so you never miss any future videos. I'm trying to reach 500,000 subscribers before the next NetherRealm game gets announced, whenever that's happening. Then without any further ado everyone, let's begin today's video. Alright, here we go, ranking the weakest characters in Mortal Kombat, starting with the weakest, then working our way down. First up, we have two characters that many of you watching have likely never even heard about because they only appear in one game, Tasia and No-Face. I think No-Face is the weaker of the two because the guy relies on flamethrowers and explosives to get the job done because he can't fight himself. Also, fun fact, he's called No-Face because he burned his own skin off by mistake while using his own weapons, so the guy's also not very smart. Pretty much a glorified meat shield, right? He works for Kano and is fully expected to die defending the Black Dragons. So yeah, you could definitely argue that No-Face is one of the weakest characters in Mortal Kombat, but right behind him is Tasia with 0 recorded wins in the entire series, which is even worse than Kira, who's killed Cobra, for a fast example. Everyone makes fun of Cobra and Kira, but at least Kira has some wins. Tasia does not, and fights with 2 katanas, which is stupid since katanas are a two-handed sword, so she's kind of an idiot dual wielding a two-handed sword. Now with all this being said, I would love if Tasia and No-Face became characters in the next game and were badasses in story mode too. That would be hilarious. Next up we have Meat, who many fans don't even consider canon since he never interacts with any of the characters in any of the games, so he might not even be real. However, even so, keep in mind that Meat's just a regular dude without his skin. Yeah, that's all he's got going for him. The man can heal in his defense, but that doesn't make you a good fighter or suddenly make you deadly. But next up we have Ferra, by herself, keep in mind. That's right, no Tor, so just a tiny woman with blades attached to her body. Yeah, that's essentially Ferra. Though in her defense, she can jump pretty well and is pretty skittish on the ground, so hard to grab, which makes her more deadly than No-Face, but probably not Tasia. Not to mention, if you separate her from Tor, then Ferra slowly starts to die. So yeah, Ferra might be the weakest solo fighter in the Mortal Kombat universe, because by herself she literally dies. So now that I think about it, Ferra is the weakest individual character in the Mortal Kombat lore. Alright everyone, real quick, GamerSupps is having a big sale, 20% off any purchase with my code UNDERDOG, or use my link down below in the pinned comment. Because once again, everything is 20% off, no matter what you choose to purchase. That's a really big sale, and every purchase you make supports my channel directly. So that's awesome. GamerSupps has energy drinks, they've got merchandise, mouse pads, all that incredible stuff. Check them out today. But alright, time for the next tier, big losers. So these characters suck, but have some wins under their belt, or at least are described as good fighters. So for example, Kira, she's killed Cobra, like straight up, and it's because Cobra is a bad fighter. The man has fire abilities and martial arts training, however, he leaves tons of gaps in his attacks, and the game states this directly. That's why he loses to Kira. In other words, the guy's a sloppy fighter and very open to counterattacks, which is why he dies to Kira. However, all that being said, I imagine that Kira and Cobra are pretty similar in power level. Then we have Jarek, who's a knockoff Kano with 0 wins under his belt. Kano at least has some wins, but honestly, it's hard to rank them against each other because Jarek has 2 laser eyes while Kano only has 1, so you would think Jarek's more deadly since he has all the same attacks as Kano but double the laser eyes. But once again, there's a scoreboard, right? Kano has more wins under his belt than Jarek does. But alright, next up we have the Deadly Jobbers tier. So these characters lose all the time, but it's mainly a writing thing because realistically they should be powerful, a force to be reckoned with when you look at their stats and abilities, all that stuff, but the writers have them lose over and over again regardless because that's their destiny or something. Baraka, for example, this man has bulletproof skin. It doesn't get mentioned enough. Baraka is bulletproof by default. Then on top of that, sick arm blades, and he lives to fight. The man's been fighting from birth pretty much. He's got so much experience battling people, so theoretically he should be a really tough opponent to beat. And yet the writers have him lose over and over again, so in the Deadly Jobber tier he goes. But next up is Collector, who's done equally dirty in my opinion because the man's got 6 arms and tons of magical items to use in battle. Then on top of that, he's a sorcerer himself. Yeah, he straight up knows magic, so Collector should be a very deadly opponent, and yet in Mortal Kombat 11 he loses every single fight. Now thankfully he's only been in 1 game, which means there's chance for redemption. Maybe in a sequel he gets to do some cool stuff. Maybe NetherRealm makes him a good guy like Reptile in Mortal Kombat 1. That would be pretty cool. Since I do believe Collector has potential, he's honestly one of the most creative characters NetherRealm's ever made, and arguably one of the most creative characters in the entire Mortal Kombat series. Or at least that's how I feel about him. But oh boy, next up is the underrated tier, Su-Hao. This man gets dunked on all the time for various reasons. However, people forget that he took down the special forces by himself. Yeah, that's pretty impressive, right? It took Jax to take this man down. Before that, Su-Hao was unstoppable. And keep in mind, in the older games, Jax was legendary. The man fought Kintaro to a standstill before getting his metal arms. So yeah, in the older games, Jax was very powerful. It wasn't until the NetherRealm era when he started getting crapped on. Or in other words, dying to Jax is not that embarrassing for Su-Hao. The man's stronger than people realize. In fact, I just remembered he took down Kenshi. Yeah, straight up in the Mortal Kombat X comics, he beat Kenshi. That's canon. So yeah, Su-Hao's not as weak as people think, along with Stryker. I know it's a meme that he beat Kintaro. I think realistically that should never have happened. It definitely feels like plot armor, but regardless, Stryker did survive the invasion during Mortal Kombat 3, which is no small feat. So don't get it twisted, Stryker might be a regular man amongst gods and very powerful martial artists, but still, the guy holds his own. I don't think he has a chance against the ninjas or Liu Kang, but still, Stryker is very underrated. And even though many fans might argue he needs his weapons to be formidable, I don't see why that's a talking point because the guy's a SWAT agent. So yeah, the guy's trained to use weapons with deadly force if necessary. It's part of his toolkit. We don't complain about Scorpion's spear or his katanas, so why can't Stryker use his guns and grenades? It's how he's trained. But alright, now finally, it's time for the last tier, which is called No Clue, and I call it that because these characters have 0 fights throughout the entire Mortal Kombat series. Then on top of that, they could be powerful because they have supernatural abilities. So in other words, they're not meat. That guy realistically is not very powerful. His greatest ability is tearing his own body apart. But these final 3 characters have supernatural abilities. I'm talking Chameleon and Chameleon with a K. Both of them theoretically should be powerful since they control many abilities at once, whether it's pyromancy, cryomancy, and everything in between from telekinesis, acid attacks, and yada yada yada, you get the idea. That's a pretty big arsenal, and for anyone watching who might not be aware, Male Chameleon, with a C, has the abilities of every male ninja in the Mortal Kombat series. That's his gameplay gimmick, and then Lady Chameleon is all the female ninjas' abilities. So Katana, Jade, Tanya, you get the idea. She has all their abilities. I know Tanya's not a ninja technically, but you get my point. Both of these characters theoretically should be very powerful, but unfortunately they never interact with any characters in the series, though I do believe they're canon. In other words, the game does state they exist, very similar to Meat, but we don't see them interact with anybody, so their power level is up in the air. But alright everyone, now finally last but certainly not least, we have Mocap. And originally I was gonna put him in peak weak tier, right? One of the weakest characters in Mortal Kombat, and that's because he's Johnny Cage's stunt double. I'm not sure how many Mortal Kombat fans are aware of that, but canonically in the Mortal Kombat universe, Mocap does exist. He's real and does actually interact with Shujinko in Conquest mode. The guy exists in the universe. But I digress. Why is Mocap in No Clue instead of peak weak? Well, because in Mortal Kombat Armageddon, the man straight up has superpowers. And I wish I was joking, but I'm not. Your boy Mocap has energy balls and levitation abilities, all that crazy stuff. So yeah, he's supernatural, very similar to to Johnny Cage. Despite being human, Mocap still has powers, just like Liu Kang and other Earthrealm warriors. Which is why, theoretically, he could be powerful. We just don't know because he never fights anybody. He gets lost in Chaos Realm, I think. And that's about it for the story of Mocap and the entire Mortal Kombat series. Which means, unlike No-Face, Ferra, or Tasia, Mocap could be powerful. We just don't actually know. The man has powers, but no recorded fights, so it's hard to know how strong he actually is. And alright everyone, there you have it, ranking the weakest characters in Mortal Kombat history, along with 3 characters who can't be ranked because they've never fought anybody. So thanks for watching, and hopefully you didn't skip to the end. Try and get 2,000 likes so I'm forced to shave the beard. Then finish that combo by subscribing and ringing that bell so you never miss any future videos. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.